as folks are coming in, we have a quiz that we want you to take as you're coming in. Um, Now, I took this quiz. I'm going to be honest; it's the belonging quiz, and um, I I actually, I'm a little competitive, so sometimes when I take these kind of quizzes, I always want to score really well, right? And so I was a little nervous when I hit submit, and I actually got kind of a high score. And and then I had to sit back and reflect and think, am I really as good of a bridge builder as I think I am? And so we're going to talk about belonging, what that actually means, and are we really building the bridges that we think we are? So as you're coming in, there's a quiz um, that's in the chat. Actually, I think I forgot to share with everyone, so I'm going to do that now. I'm really excited to have Z and Bailey to talk about belonging, which really is critical to building bridges to help manage some of these tensions within our organizations. We know there's a lot to talk about outside socially, but we're going to try to keep this focused around organizational belonging. And so I want to do a quick introduction of both of them. So let's see, is there a slide for Z? So, and then I'm going to put her bio in there. Z, I've known Z for a very long time and was really excited when she became the president CEO for the Center of Economic Opportunity and Belonging. And she's just done a phenomenal job with that, spinning it off of EDC Utah and making it its own private entity. And so it's just really exciting what they're doing in terms of connecting uh, belonging within our organization. So they're obviously going to take you through that at a higher level.
Afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with you today. My name is Zeeman Sao, and I'm the president and CEO of the Center for Economic Opportunity and Belonging. The center is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, relatively new, and our mission is to work with communities to catalyze public and private and philanthropic partnerships to address opportunity gaps. We center our work around actionable strategies, but also understanding that we need to build belonging. And we're so excited to be here today with you to talk about what belonging means and how can we actionalize it in our workplaces.
It's been a joy to get to know Bailey through the Center for Economic Opportunity and Belonging. And she has been really instrumental in operationalizing the belonging work that the center's been doing.
Is Bailey Rivera Wines. I'm the special project manager here at the center with Z, and I'm honored to get to work with Z and do this belonging and bridging work. And thank you, Sarah, for having us today.
So they are going to tag team today to present some important concepts around belonging that I think we may or may not have understood. If back I first started hearing the word belonging, I would say probably about 7 years ago when I first started doing consulting work. And one of the organizations I worked with, they really want a belonging in their letters, diversity, inclusion, belonging. And I thought, okay, that's good, but I don't really understand how it's different than diversity and inclusion. And then you started to see it more and more and more. And then I think with this, divisions that we're experiencing, people have really looked to belonging as a way to communicate what some organizational goals around inclusion are. And so I'm excited for this conversation to help give us some focus and frameworks on belonging, because I think for a lot of us, we've just kind of mushed it in to the other letters. And so this is going to give us an opportunity to get some clarity around that. So I'm very excited for that. Um, let's see. I am just going to kick it off to you two.
We've sort of seen this rise of, the term belonging and people wanting to understand it and implement it in their work and in their daily lives. But belonging has been something that um, we've always, as humans, have felt a need for. Actually, some researchers and scholars have revised our hierarchical needs to include shelter, food, water, but also include belonging in that as well. It's a really important um, aspect of being a human. And So yeah, it's just a very interesting thing about belonging. So why the rise in belonging right now? Why are we seeing this? So we're witnessing and we're all experiencing this mass polarization, not only in America but also around the world. Um, we're seeing an increase of the scarcity mindset and the fear of the unknown as we're experiencing rapid changes, and we're all um, having this collective anxiety that's causing us to break away from one another. Um, and we're also, having some fear of things and people or in groups or things and organizations that we deem as different from us. And so it's a us versus them mentality, or as Professor John Powell at UC Berkeley likes to call it, othering. And the antidote to that is belonging. Belonging is a comprehensive approach, it's a framework, but it's also an aspiration for us to reconnect and grow together as a community.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bailey, for that great just introduction to belonging. And I really love the way that you introduce it. Belonging is not new. Belonging is always part of a humanity throughout the ages, and all of us have created a sense of needing to belong to a space. When we are born, we have this feeling of finding belonging. But it's more important now because of the trends that we are seeing in the community, and we're excited to share with you some of the grounding framework around belonging. But before we get started, we would love to just do a really quick exercise. If you can on the chats, and if you're not comfortable in doing that, you can do it in the question and answers uh, tab on the Zoom. So share an experience when you do not feel like you belong. Were you able to overcome that feeling, and if so, how? So just to get a pause and ground ourselves a little bit, if you're willing to, please share in the chats, answer those two questions on the chats, share an experience where you do not feel like you belong, and were you able to overcome that feeling, and if so, how? And in the meantime, I'll share like a moment where I did not feel like I belong in that. And as an immigrant who immigrated to the United States, it took me a long time to find my sense of belonging. And the one time, and for many ways, the one thing that I did not that prevented me from feeling like I could belong here is that I do speak with an accent, and that has always made me feel like I'm the other in whatever setting it is, and I was very shameful of that particular way, and that was one thing that I feel like I couldn't belong, and until someone come up to me, and so I was was able to overcome that feeling, because someone was able to validate with me to say it's okay to speak with an accent. You don't have to lose your accent to be an American and belong in the United States. And so it was someone validating and recognizing that for me, that was able to help me overcome my experience of not finding belonging.
So please go to the Q&A. Someone's being a non-religious and divorced immigrant in Utah County, I have felt many times that I don't belong, but have looked for and found a community and those who help me feel welcome and loved just as I am. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Exactly. And those are very common when people ask people that question, which gets to the strategies as we design and talk about in today's webinar today, is that how do we create an environment so we can help everyone to feel like they could belong here? And a lot of times it's building those connections. So thank you so much for sharing that.
As someone said, when I was a child, I wanted to join the Girl Scouts, the Brownies, and was told it was only for members of the LDS Church.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's not great.
Yeah, and I think this is Professor John Powell talks about this a lot, and this is the greatest challenge that we have as human beings. We tend to group ourselves in things that we are common. We have commonalities too, right? So in this space is that we have Girl Scouts where we allow girls to come together, and I think this also applies to the affinity work groups that we might have in the companies, the different affinity work groups. So we have to think very intentionally is that when we are in the process of finding and building belonging for ourselves, we might unintentionally other others. And so how do we think about be very intentional in thinking in advance to prevent that from happening? How do you make sure that you setting up to celebrate your uniqueness, but in the same time does not unintentionally exclude someone from your own desire to find belonging? So what is belonging? And we define belonging as both an aspiration and as something practical. We hear this all the time because belonging is on a part of our center's name. And for many times, people are asking us, is belonging just about a feeling? Is this as an aspiration? And absolutely it is. And I shared with you early on that everyone is one. With the need to belong, but we also think that it's practical. We have to work intentionally to build the spaces for everyone to belong. And so it is a North Star to help North Star that helps us declare the kind of community that we want to live in, one that is safe, and those are like some of the key elements for belonging, right? One that is safe, vibrant, and connected. But belonging is also a framework that provides the foundation for us to work individually and collectively towards a society where everyone is valued and could thrive. And I really want to emphasize that this effort of building belonging is both individual and collective.
Belonging is not only a feeling and something that we aspire to, but it's a framework that we can all work in and that we can implement not only in our personal lives, but also in our organizations and our businesses, and how we conduct ourselves. And so these are some elements of belonging that we have identified as being important aspects to fostering. So the first one is co-creation, and that's the ability to act and contribute to the systems we are a part of. This means having individual and collective responsibility to contribute to shaping institutions, groups, and communities we belong to. And the second one is connection. Belonging thrives when there's a deep sense of connection, bringing people together into their community, their institution, or their group. And this ensures meaningful relationships. The third one is recognition, and this is a demonstration that communities or institutions sees, respects, and values our differences. Um, I think we all feel great when we get, our manager tells us that we did a really good job on a specific project, or that we did a great job in fostering a partnership with an important stakeholder. And then the fourth one is bridging. People with differences come together, acknowledge their differences, and build empathy for each other. And we'll get more into bridging later on in the presentation.
Things that I would love for this group to think about is that I know many of you are DE&I practitioners in this space and are experts in that field. As you look at these 4 elements that we have identified, and when we say we have identified, we did not come up with these elements for belonging. There's a lot of research that's been done, and the framework that we're presenting it to you, we've been adapting it from the Othering and Belonging Institute, as well as other scholars and researchers around this. So this is we didn't make this up. There is a lot of research behind it. But my point is, as you think about your work in the DE&I space, and as you look at these elements, think about which ones of it is already happening in the space and is aligning with your DE&I initiative within your company, right? So I could mention you're really doing a great job in terms of providing connection, recognition. I think those are really strong elements that aligns with DE&I strategies. The 2 that I think I want to really elevate a little bit is this idea of co-creation. So as you're designing your DE&I strategies, are you co-creating it with the individuals that you are wanting to create this space with? And if not, how can you elevate it? Thinking about who's missing in the table that is not at the table right now. And the other piece that I want to really elevate is the idea of bridging, which we'll go into a lot more detail about. And this is the space that I think businesses might not be entering into, and is an element that you should consider thinking more into if you are thinking of incorporating belonging as part of your strategy. So this is a graphic that we want to share with you and just further elaborate and dig deeper into what we're talking about in the elements. So we have the first slide, of course, is exclusion, where we are excluding individuals from the space. I'm sure that you guys all understand and see that. Inclusion is when you are creating having the existing infrastructure, but including people into it. And then the differences with belonging is expanding that infrastructure even more. How do we build infrastructure that's greater so that you are not taking someone's seat at the table, but actually creating that a bigger table so that everyone could belong into this. I think that belonging also is important too when we talk about this, is about the multifaceted identity that all of us comes into our spaces. When you look at an individual, you don't just have one identity. It's the multi-sectional identity that we carry, and the intersectionalities of all of our experiences also adds to it. And it's the ability for all of us to think about how do we celebrate those and connecting all the dots. And so an example of that is when you have, again, going back to the employee affiliated groups, you have, how do you strengthen those groups, but how do you build connections within those groups as well, to build an environment where you are entering into the space where multiple identities could be intersect.
I have a question on the last slide,
Yes.
on that slide. Yeah. And like, I think D&I professionals, we look at this and we're like, that's awesome. Like we get really excited. I think it reminds me of something that we're always telling people, that there's, the pie is unlimited, right? We make more pies, and people sometimes look at DE&I as kind of the scarcity. If I'm giving to one group, I can't give to another group. When I look at this image, it's exciting, but also I do a lot of work with executives, and if they were to look at this, I would feel that it would actually cause a little bit of stress and concern, because organizations, right, have certain structures. And something that I'll often hear from leaders is, well, I I can't ask everybody's opinion on every single business decision. And you want me to be inclusive, right? And I said, no, 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 that's not what we're saying. But if I'm looking at this for the first time and I'm, let's say, a leader of an organization, I may feel a little overwhelmed by this image. So I'm curious, how do you talk a newer leader through this type of what is it that you are trying to convey to them that belonging will do to their organization?
Yeah, I think it's really taking a step back, and like you mentioned earlier, from the scarcity mentality standpoint, right? We always have to kind of justify how are we allocating resources to support the efforts, and we always come back to say, this is your ROI, return on your investment on this particular activity. And I think that the way that we need to think about it is taking a step back even greater and thinking about the long term. I know that a lot of times leaders think about the short term. So it's reframing the framing from this the resource constraint mentality to thinking about how can we expand the opportunities that by allowing individuals to contribute to it actually might not be a constraint on you. It actually expands the efforts even more, right? And that when you're providing individuals with the ability to co-design, sometimes they will step up to the plate, and you'll see efforts happening that you might not see if you're coming from a constrained mentality. I don't know if that answers your question. It is complex, and hopefully as we dig deeper into this, we can explore that even more.
Yeah, I love that explanation, and I think too the thing that it really made me realize in this image is these are not like financial resources we're talking about. We're talking about, I think, the mental emotional capacities of people become expanded, right? And so what we're talking about is really accessing the full range of the thinking capacity and the ability to contribute from everybody in the organization. And if those other graphics that I'm seeing feel quite limited, right? And the one on the right, belonging, is very expansive. Like we're really accessing the full range of our human capabilities. And that's maybe one way that I'm looking at this to kind of process what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
that
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I mean it is about thinking, just really shifting with the other mentality too, that instead of coming from the scarcity mentality of always needing to give, is that by really making those connections, investing in recognitions, investing in the individual's uniquenesses, which part of DE&I, you're actually providing opportunity to expand your resources even more than we have, right? Like building a bigger we, so that solutions could be created that you don't know existed in your workplace and in the community as a whole, right? And I think a lot of the arguments, explanations is very similar to why we invest in diversity, equity, and inclusion, but taking even one step further beyond that and introducing ways that you can explore beyond just our unique differences, but also the intersection of our differences could also be incorporated in this process. So how do we think about building a bigger table is always the framing that we're looking into, instead of how do we squeeze more people in the existing table that we have.
Not only is DEI and also belonging is also a journey. DEI is a journey. You know, companies have been implementing DEI plans for, years, and that's also how it is with belonging. It is a journey. You take baby steps, you implement foundational um, policies and practices and guides, and then you go work from there. It's not something that will just happen overnight. It takes intentional work and time.
Thank you so much for the great discussion. We want to focus today, as I mentioned before, the four elements of belonging. The one that we really want to focus on, and I think that one that oftentimes businesses might not be practicing, is bridging. And we see bridging as an essential ingredient to building belonging. It also ties into the other elements too, as well, in terms of co-creation and so forth. If you're not able to bring people together to have the difficult conversations, then we're not building the connections we need. And connection is one of us a really key success metrics for finding belonging, is the ability to be able to connect with individuals in a specific space. So we'll dig deeper into that on what bridging is, which I think gets to a next slide. I don't know if you have a chance yet to take the quiz that Sarah has put on in the beginning of the webinar. There is a quiz that you can take. It's called the Bridging Differences quiz. This comes from the Greater Good Institute, who has been doing a lot of work on bridging. For those of you who have took the test, I'm curious to find out how you did. Sarah also took the test, and she alluded to it early on, and she actually scored pretty high, right, Sarah? I took this test and I did not score as high as I should. And so I have a lot of work to be done internally, as well
Well,
as externally.
but that was what, when I got a high score, I was like, Uh, but did I bias my answers? It's not like the implicit association test where you just, you have to respond so rapidly that you can't overthink it. These ones, when you take you're looking at the range of the questions and being like, gosh, I really hope that I'm doing that. And so even though I got a high score, I just was like, I wonder if I really am bridging as well as I think I am, like perception versus reality, you know? So I'm not bragging that I got a high score. I'm just thinking, where did I, where was I a little too self-congratulatory, you know? So I just want people to know that, like, I'm not like an expert at bridging at all.
No, I don't think we are all experts in bridging, and I think this is a great, just a tool for us to understand where we can make improvements, and just really grounding ourselves on what bridging is. So well, if you have took the test and if you want to share your scores, please feel free to put it on the chat or put on the Q&A if you don't want people to know who you are. Um, but we'll go on and go on to explaining a little bit more about bridging and how do you implement it in your business.
What exactly is bridging, right? So people come together, acknowledge their differences, and build empathy. So a key part of this is finding shared common values in which we can then work together towards a collective future where we can all thrive. Bridging isn't about persuasion, and bridging is how we actively create connections and envision a larger we. So this means keep your experiences and your opinions while also recognizing the importance of other people's experiences and opinions. Um, as Z said earlier, we all have very intersectional identities that are multifaceted, and it's important to understand that people have, very um, legitimate reasons for their opinions and their perspective on things, just as your opinions and perspective on things um, is legitimate as well. So this means coming into conversations, wanting to discover other people's whys, and finding out the things that you have in common as a starting point to build a connection and relationship. Once you've established this relationship and have it be based on trust and respect and openness, you can then start to work together to imagine possible solutions that are lasting and also representative of all individuals, hopefully.
Yeah, to just add to it, why does this matter in a business? And we know that we all live in a polarized society right now. We're more divided as a community and a society than anything else. And it's manifesting in all aspects of our lives, right? We're not able to have Thanksgiving dinners anymore because we don't want to talk about the various differences, or again, is getting into very contentious. I was just listening to the radio this couple of few days, and there was a lot of articles, segments actually about companies becoming neutral. Let's not take stands towards one way or the other because it's causing conflicts in the community, in the workplaces. And I think that trend will continue just because of the division and polarization that we're seeing in a society today. So what is the role of the business? Having individuals avoiding each other in the lunchroom or not being able to see each other as co-workers is going to cause an impact in the community, or is going to cause an impact in your business. And so what is the role that businesses could do to kind of ease those tensions, so that people could see each other eye to eye to increase productivity? And part of it is that we argue that is that businesses need to make sure that they're entering this phase of bridging. How do you bring your employees together to not to persuade each other one way or the other, but mainly to bring them together to have a conversation, to identify their shared values? And a lot of times, I think businesses has done a really great job with identifying, putting people who are similar together and celebrate, which is really important as well. But there is a need now more than ever to bring people who might not have similarities also together and making those safe spaces for them to do it. And this is part of belonging that is that additional layer that we're talking about when we talk about building belonging above and beyond diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Especially because a lot of the hot topics that are sort of causing these tensions have very real impacts on a lot of people's lives. And so it's very natural for them to want to talk and express and share their experiences with the people that are around them. We spend most of our day at work. And so it's natural to want to express some of those things with the people that we are around the most. Um, and because of that, saying that we're banning, these topics might just not be realistic for people building connections and relationships in their workplaces. And so having businesses find a way to navigate these topics and conversations in a safe way is really essential way for us to build safe workplaces where we can all express our differences and identities and experiences.
In your space, a couple of things to keep in mind. First and foremost is that we have to acknowledge there is going to be a power differences when you bring people together. Even if they're the same employees, they're because of our because of the complexities, there is going to be power dynamics and power differences. So when you're bringing groups together to do this bridging work, and we recognize that too, Bailey and I in the center has been doing a lot of bridging work recently, and the need to make sure that you're creating at least as much of a neutral ground as possible to make sure that there is not a hierarchy of power between the individual participants in this group is really important. So we just really want to make sure we caution that. And we share this as well. People come to conversation with so many multiple identities and stories that are complex, and being able to make sure that we're open to seeing the multiple stories that people bring and the intersections of it is important as you begin to think about implementing bridging in your workplaces.
So there are different types of bridges. We have 4 different types. There are short bridges, which involve somewhat close groups. There's already some established values between these groups, and they're not very difficult bridges to build. And then we have long bridges, which take a lot of time and work. There aren't many already established shared values. And so it's going to take work to find those values that you share and things that you can find common ground on. And then there are weak bridges that are short-term bridges. They don't have a foundational relationship that's built on trust and respect. And then there are sturdy bridges that are built to last, and that these ones take a lot of work and intention, but they are very, they're going to last a long time.
You can start with just building the short bridges, but also thinking what are those long bridges that you have to build, that what is causing the most tension within your companies that you need to build. Bailey and I was doing a similar presentation with nonprofit organizations leaders yesterday, and we have an attendee who shared with us that they're trying to build some pretty long bridges within the company, within the organization, because there are so many differences. There's a strike set of differences within the company, 2 sets of employees. And so they're trying to find ways to build those long bridges that is needed, but also knowing that they're not going to get there tomorrow. The building long bridges is hard work and it's long work to do it. So being really coming into this when you're doing this work in understanding what type of bridges are you intending to build and what is the outcome by building those bridges. There are 3 skill sets that we want to talk about. One is intrapersonal bridging. And this is the quiz that you took earlier, you haven't taken and will be taking, will help you understand what do you need to do internally to prepare yourself for bridging. Right? What are the ways that you can mentally set yourself to have an open mind? How do you set yourself up so that you're willing to do this and listen to other stories? Like we said earlier, bridging is not about persuading the other person to do something that is different than you. Bridging really is thinking about how do you talk to someone, even though if you have differences, how do you talk to someone to discover the commonalities? How do you respect individuals, even when they're different, when they all have a different set of mindset than you, right? And so you have to really think about how do you cultivate the mindsets to deepen those skill sets internally so that you're able to do things externally when you're doing the bridging with individuals. We'll be sharing with you a building bridges playbook, and it'll go in depth into all of the skill sets, and it walks you step by step. And this will be a great tool too, if you are doing bridging work within your workplace, to be able to use those skill sets with your employees, with the individuals in your company. The second set of skills is what we consider as interpersonal skill sets. So how do you interact? What are the skill sets you need to develop when you're interacting with someone, right? Some of the things is pretty simple. I mean, it's when we talk about it, it's like, yes, that makes sense. But stepping back in the moment when you don't feel like that you're disagreeing with someone, preventing conflicts from escalating. What are the skill sets you need to develop so that you don't escalate things when it gets intense? How do you form stronger connections with those who think differently than you? Those are all those interpersonal skill sets that we could develop as we begin to do this bridging work. And then the last skill set is what we call intergroup bridging. How do you bring groups together? So we talk about how do you work individually, how do you work within interpersonal, but there is also intergroup. And I think this is a really exciting exercise too with companies, especially those that has employee affiliated groups. How do you find ways to bring two groups who might be different together, who might have different shared sets of values, together to have a conversation about recognizing each other's assets in this space and respecting each other's differences. And so it would be interesting if you in your company, as I mentioned, have two different affinity groups that have different value sets, and how do you bring them together and help them build those skill sets so that they could do the bridging work that's needed.
With the interpersonal bridging, there's sometimes individuals that are not ready to bridge. They themselves maybe are struggling with the interpersonal bridging, or maybe just have some um, blocks or experiences in their lives that are not allowing them um, to engage in this open way. And that's totally okay. And also on the reverse, there may be some people in our lives that we are not personally ready to bridge with, and that is also totally fine. And it's good to recognize that. So implementing, think about your organization's mission. Is your organization's mission um, contributing to furthering belonging in Utah? And so you might want to think about, who are you unintentionally leaving out? How can you expand your table to include these people? Create spaces for tough, respectful dialogue. That may be, in an office environment, create a lunch every month for a dialogue on a different topic. Or if you're fully remote, create a group me or a certain Slack channel for these kinds of dialogues, but have them facilitated. You could partner with organizations who share your values, but may have a different approach for mission. And you can also join the center's Bridging Conversations group.
Building connections, the connections that's necessary to make people feel like belong. And oftentimes making connections with people who are similar to us or with employees who are similar to each other. And the challenge now is the other step, the next step is, how do you build connections with your employees who might disagree with each other, because that is the next step that's necessary to make sure that everyone could feel like they belong in a business. And I think that is the tougher work that needs to be done in terms of in terms of building a vibrant space where everyone could belong and that could support you in your bottom lines. In terms of resources, we do have a list of resources available. There's a lot of tools there. I think we emphasized this earlier. By bringing people together and not providing a platform, it's not going to work. bridging needs to make sure that you have the tools and resources. You need to be able to help equip your employees to be able to do this work. And it has to be facilitated. And there's many, many models out there that you can use. Living room conversations that many of you have heard about before is there. The bridging differences playbook that we have is there. You can also partner with existing organizations there. We've been doing a lot of partnering with a group called Braver Angels. They focus mostly on a political divide. And Utah Humanities has a place called Conversations in the Box. So encourage all of you to think about how you can tap into those resources.
Yeah, we have a note on the great resources. It's so nice to have options. And I think it's also a great reminder that there are a lot of folks in Utah that are really working on this. And, belonging is a critical thing, especially right now with everything going on. So I really appreciate how practical you made this conversation for all of us. I do think too, I was really struck with kind of the two elements of co-creation and bridging. And I absolutely agree with you that really makes it quite distinct from some of the other work that we might see in DEI, such as affinity groups, right? Where you're really gathering like-minded folks together for the most part. But not really, branching out into those harder, belonging, the bridging conversations. While I think affinity groups would love for that to happen, right? It's not actually happening at the level that we know is possible. Um, and so I really appreciate you bringing this to the forefront. Let's see, there's a note in chat. Just want to say it for the group. I love these conversations for Utah. I wish it was mandatory for the company managers attending meetings and trainings like this one. Yeah, and that I've actually done some of the Utah conversations, and it's really fascinating. And you don't have to have like-minded people. We've had very different perspectives, and you can have these conversations respectfully. But I think it's that skill that we're just sorely missing in society, right? Of how to have these respectfully in a dignified way and really honor the different perspectives that folks have. I know it's possible, right? But that willingness to kind of temper down our emotions when we're having these conversations. Um, Thank you so much. Please take the survey. Um, and please check out, let me actually put the link of your organization in here if anybody wants to follow up with you. You guys are such a great resource to our community, and I appreciate you um, doing this webinar and giving us a different way to look at um, all of the great D, E, and I and B work going on, and giving us really a clear understanding of what the B actually is and can be in our organizations. Thank you, Z. Thank you, Bailey. Thanks everyone for joining.